The night was quiet in the desert of Nevada, where Daniel Harper sat alone in the control room of a small observatory. The room smelled faintly of coffee and old electronics, and the hum of machines filled the air. Outside, the stars stretched endlessly across the sky, their light piercing through the thin atmosphere. Inside, rows of monitors displayed charts, graphs, and streams of data that only someone like Daniel could understand. Daniel wasn't just any astronomer. He had spent most of his life searching for anything that might prove humanity wasn't alone in the universe. For years he scanned the skies, listening to the static between the stars, hoping to catch even the smallest hint of intelligent life. Most nights were uneventful, but tonight felt different. A strange signal had appeared on one of his screens, and it didn't look like random noise. It was structured, almost mathematical. His hands hovered over the keyboard as he tried to make sense of what he was seeing. At first, he thought it might be interference from a satellite or some kind of glitch. But as he ran the data through filters and algorithms, the pattern became clearer. It wasn't random. This was real. Whatever it was, it came from deep space, far beyond the reaches of Earth's solar system. Daniel leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. His heart raced. Was this finally it? Had humanity made contact with alien life? He sent an urgent message to the United Nations Space Command, UNSC, headquartered in Colorado Springs. Within hours, teams of scientists and engineers were analyzing the signal. They worked tirelessly, breaking it down piece by piece. The signal contained patterns that seemed deliberate, like a series of numbers and symbols repeating in cycles. Some believed it was a code, while others thought it might be a map. After weeks of study, they reached a conclusion. The signal wasn't just random communication. It was an invitation. The news spread quickly. Governments around the world held emergency meetings. Military leaders debated whether this was a trick or a genuine attempt at first contact. In the end, the decision was unanimous. Humanity would respond. General Marcus Bellamy, a stern man with sharp eyes and a voice that commanded respect, took charge of the operation. Under his leadership, Earth's interstellar fleet began preparing for the journey. The fleet was massive, consisting of dozens of ships built for exploration and combat. Among them was the frigate Freedom's Edge, commanded by Captain Elena Cruz. She was a woman in her late 30s with dark hair tied back into a tight bun and a calm demeanor that masked her fierce determination. Her crew trusted her completely, knowing she would do whatever it took to keep them safe. On board the Freedom's Edge were Lieutenant Adam Porter, a young officer eager to prove himself, and Maria Delgado, an engineer who could fix anything. With enough time and tools, as the fleet prepared to leave, another group of experts gathered aboard the command ship Atlas Prime. One of them was Rachel Newman, a linguist known for her work decoding ancient languages. Rachel had been chosen because of her ability to think outside the box. If the aliens communicated in ways humans couldn't understand, she would be the one to figure it out. She spent long hours poring over the signal, trying to decipher its meaning. At first, she shared the excitement of everyone else. But as she dug deeper, doubts began to creep in. Something about the signal didn't sit right with her. The pattern seemed too perfect, almost mechanical. There was no warmth, no personality behind it. It reminded her less of a greeting and more of a formula. She voiced her concerns during a meeting with General Bellamy and other senior officers. "We're assuming this is an invitation," she said, her voice steady but cautious. "But what? If it's not? What if it's a warning, or worse, a trap?" Her words hung in the air, met with silence. No one wanted to believe they were walking into danger, but Rachel's instincts told her otherwise. Still, there was no turning back now. The fleet launched from orbital stations near Mars and Luna, leaving Earth behind as they ventured into the unknown. Weeks passed as the ships traveled through the vast emptiness of space. The crew aboard the Freedom's Edge grew restless. Conversations turned to speculation about what they might find. Some imagined peaceful aliens eager to share knowledge. Others feared hostile beings intent on conquest. Captain Cruz kept her thoughts to herself, focusing instead on ensuring her ship and crew were ready for whatever lay ahead. Finally, After months of travel, the fleet arrived at the coordinates where the signal originated. What they found left them speechless. Floating in orbit around a dead planet was a massive alien structure, a ring-like station so large it dwarfed even the biggest human vessels. Its surface shimmered with an iridescent glow, reflecting the dim light of a distant star. Scans showed no signs of life, but energy readings pulsed faintly from within. General Bellamy ordered a team to investigate. Captain Cruz volunteered to lead the mission, taking Adam and Maria with her. As their shuttle approached the station, the sheer scale of it became overwhelming. It looked ancient, like it had been abandoned for thousands of years. Yet, despite its age, parts of it still seemed functional. Lights flickered along its edges, and faint vibrations suggested machinery operating deep inside. Rachel stayed aboard the Atlas Prime, continuing her work on the signal. She noticed subtle details that others had missed. Certain patterns repeated, in ways that hinted at urgency. It wasn't a casual message, it was desperate. Her unease grew stronger. She couldn't shake the feeling that humanity had misunderstood something critical. When Cruz and her team entered the station, they found themselves in a labyrinth of corridors and chambers. The walls were covered in strange symbols, glowing faintly in the darkness. Every step echoed loudly, as though the station itself was watching them. Maria examined panels and controls, marveling at the advanced technology. Adam kept watch, his hand resting on the grip of his weapon. Cruz led the way, her expression unreadable. Then, without warning, the station came alive. Lights flashed and alarms blared. Automated defenses activated, sealing off sections and deploying drones. Communications with the fleet began to fail, and the crew started experiencing strange sensations, visions of war, destruction, and alien worlds burning. Panic set in as they realized they weren't alone. Something or someone was still here, back on the Atlas Prime, Rachel pieced together the final translation. Her face went pale as she read the words aloud to General Bellamy. "It wasn't an invitation," she whispered. "It was a warning. The signal was sent by a species that had already been destroyed. They were trying to tell us to stay away. But it was too late. Humanity had answered the call, and now they would have to face the consequences." Let me know if you'd like this saved as a separate document, opening parenthesis .docx or .pdf. The alien station loomed ahead, a silent sentinel in the void of space. Its massive, ring-like structure spun slowly, casting eerie shadows across the fleet's monitors. Captain Elena Cruz tightened her grip on the controls of the shuttle as she guided it toward the station's outer hull. Beside her, Lieutenant Adam Porter checked his weapon one last time, while Maria Delgado fiddled nervously with her toolkit. None of them spoke. The weight of what they were about to do pressed down on them like a storm cloud. When the shuttle docked, the team stepped out cautiously. The airlock opened with a hiss, revealing a dark corridor that stretched endlessly into the station. The walls were smooth and metallic, glowing faintly with an iridescent light. Strange symbols etched into the surface pulsed rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat. The silence was deafening, broken only by the soft hum of unseen machinery. "This place feels wrong," Adam muttered, glancing over his shoulder. His voice echoed unnaturally, bouncing off the walls in a way that made it hard to tell where. It came from Maria nodded, her eyes scanning the environment. "It's old, but not dead. Some of these systems are still running." She knelt to examine a panel near the floor, her fingers tracing the edges of its design. "I've never seen tech like this before. It's beyond anything we've built." Cruz didn't respond. Her focus was sharp, her gaze sweeping the corridor for any signs of danger. "Stay close," she said finally. "We don't know what's waiting for us in here." As they moved deeper into the station, the atmosphere grew heavier. The air smelled stale, tinged with something metallic and sharp. The walls seemed to shift slightly when no one was looking directly at them, as though the station itself was alive and watching. Every step felt like walking through water, slow, deliberate, and exhausting. Rachel Newman, back aboard the Atlas Prime, worked feverishly to decode more of the signal. Her workstation was cluttered with notes and screens. displaying streams of data. She chewed on the end of a pen, her brow furrowed in concentration. Something wasn't adding up. The patterns she had identified earlier weren't just urgent, they were desperate. Whoever had sent the signal hadn't been trying to invite others. They'd been begging for help or warning them away. "General Bellamy," Rachel called. "Out," her voice trembling slightly. When he approached, she turned her screen toward him. "Look at this. These repeating sequences, they're warnings. They're telling us to stay away from this place." Bellamy frowned, his jaw tightening. "It's too late for that now. Our people are already inside. We need to focus on getting them out safely." Rachel hesitated, then nodded. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were already in over their heads. Inside the station, Cruz and her team reached a large chamber filled with towering machines. The room hummed with energy, and arcs of electricity crackled between conduits overhead. In the center stood a massive console, its surface covered in glowing symbols that shifted and rearranged themselves constantly. Maria immediately went to work, pulling tools from her belt and examining the device. "I think I can interface with this," she said after a moment. "If I can access its core, maybe we can figure out what this place is, or was." Adam kept watch, pacing around the perimeter of the room. His hand hovered near his weapon, ready to draw it at a moment's notice. "This doesn't feel right," he said again, his voice low. "Why would anyone build something like this and then just leave it here?" Before anyone could answer, the lights flickered violently, plunging the room into darkness for a split second. When they returned, the symbols on the console began moving faster, almost frantically. A low rumble shook the floor beneath their feet. "What did you do?" Cruz demanded, turning to Maria. "Nothing," Maria replied quickly, stepping back from the console. "It reacted on its own." Suddenly, the doors leading out of the chamber slammed shut with a resounding clang. Panels along the walls slid open, revealing rows of dormant drones. Their sleek, insect-like forms twitched as they powered on, their glowing eyes locking onto the intruders. "We've got company," Adam said grimly, raising his weapon. The drones launched into action, darting toward the team with alarming speed. Cruz shouted orders, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Take cover. Focus your fire." Laser blasts erupted, filling the room with flashes of light and bursts of smoke. The drones were relentless, swarming closer despite the damage inflicted on them. Maria scrambled behind a pillar, clutching her toolkit tightly. "There's two. Many of them," she yelled. Cruz fired steadily, taking down two drones with precise shots. "Fall back to the console. We need to shut this thing down." Adam provided covering fire as Maria and Cruz retreated. Maria dropped to her knees beside the console, her hands flying over its surface as she tried to override the system. She exclaimed. "But it's fighting me. Whatever this thing is, it doesn't want us messing with it." Back on the Atlas Prime, Rachel continued analyzing the signal. She noticed something new, a series of repeating phrases buried deep within the code. Using translation algorithms, she pieced together fragments of meaning. Her hands trembled as she typed the final interpretation onto her screen. "They weren't destroyed," she whispered to herself. "They sealed something away. Something dangerous." Her heart raced as she realized the truth. The station wasn't abandoned, it was a prison. And whatever had been locked inside was waking up on the ground? Maria managed to disable the drones temporarily, causing them to freeze mid-attack. The team took advantage of the lull to regroup. "That won't hold them for long," she warned. "We need to get out of here," Cruz nodded, her expression grim. "Let's move, fast." As they made their way back toward the airlock, the station seemed to come alive around them. Walls shifted, corridors twisted, and gravity fluctuated. Wildly, the symbols on the walls pulsed faster, almost angrily. Voices began to echo in their minds, not words, but feelings of dread, despair, and hunger. "This isn't natural," Adam said, his voice shaking. "It's like the station is alive and it knows we're here." Maria stumbled, grabbing onto Adam for support. I can't think straight," she gasped. "It's messing with my head." Cruz grabbed both of them firmly by the shoulders. "Stay focused. Keep moving." Finally, they reached the airlock only to find it sealed shut. Maria worked quickly to hack the controls, sweat dripping down her face. Behind them, the sound of approaching drones grew louder. Time was running out. Rachel, monitoring the situation from the Atlas Prime, received a transmission from Cruz. "We're trapped," Cruz reported tersely. "The station's defenses have been activated. We need backup now." Bellamy listened intently, his expression unreadable. "Do whatever it takes to survive," he ordered. "We're sending reinforcements." But as the fleet prepared to intervene, the station released a powerful pulse that disabled most of the ship's systems. Alarms blared across the fleet as engines sputtered and communications faltered. The station wasn't just defending itself, it was attacking. Rachel stared at her screen, her mind racing. She knew what had to be done. "General," she said, "urgently, we have to shut down the beacon. If we don't, it'll keep calling out to whatever's out there." Bellamy hesitated, then nodded. "Get me a plan, now." Inside the station, Maria finally managed to open the airlock. The team rushed inside, sealing the door behind them just as the drones arrived. They collapsed against the walls, breathing heavily. "We can't stay here," Cruz said, her voice firm despite her exhaustion. "We need to get back to the fleet and regroup." But as the shuttle detached from the station and began its journey back, the crew realized something horrifying. The station's beacon was still active, and it was broadcasting stronger than ever. Somewhere, far beyond the stars, something was listening, and it was coming. Let me know if you'd like this saved as a separate document opening parenthesis .docx or .pdf. The shuttle carrying Captain Elena Cruz, Lieutenant Adam Porter, and Maria Delgado sped away from the alien station, its engines straining under the weight of urgency. None of them spoke as they watched the massive structure grow smaller through the viewport. The station loomed behind them, pulsing with energy, its beacon still broadcasting a signal that seemed to stretch across the stars. Back aboard the Atlas Prime, Rachel Newman worked tirelessly at her station. Her fingers flew over the keyboard as she analyzed new data streaming in from the station. She had pieced together fragments of the alien message, but the deeper she dug, the clearer it became that humanity had made a grave mistake. The station wasn't a relic of a dead civilization, it was a prison, and whatever had been locked inside wasn't gone. It was waiting. Rachel leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples. Her mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. She turned to General Marcus Bellamy, who stood nearby, his arms crossed and his face grim. "General," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "this isn't just a warning. This station was built to contain something dangerous." Bellamy's eyes narrowed. "What kind of something?" Rachel hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "From what I can tell, it's a weapon or maybe even a species. They called it the Devourers." She paused, letting the name sink in. "Whoever built this station fought a war against them and lost. Instead of destroying them, they sealed them away here, but now ... She trailed off, glancing at the screens showing the station's relentless broadcast. Bellamy didn't respond immediately. His gaze shifted to the fleet, scattered and struggling to recover from the stations. "Pulse attack. If we don't shut that beacon down," he said finally, his voice heavy with resolve, "we're going to have bigger problems than drones and shifting walls." On board the shuttle, Cruz and her team were debriefed as soon as they docked with the Freedom's Edge. Their faces were pale, their movements slow and deliberate. The stress of the mission weighed heavily on all of them. Maria sat slumped in a chair, her toolkit resting forgotten on the floor beside her. Adam paced nervously, his hand gripping the hilt of his weapon like a lifeline. Cruz remained calm, though her sharp eyes betrayed the tension simmering beneath. "The surface. We need to go back," Cruz said firmly, addressing her crew and the senior officers gathered in the briefing room. "That station is calling out to something? If we don't stop it, we might not get another chance." "But how?" Maria asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "We barely made it out alive the first time. That place is ... wrong. It's like it's alive," Cruz nodded. "I know. But if we don't try, we're risking everything including Earth." The decision was made quickly. A small strike team would return to the station with the goal of disabling the beacon. Time was running out already. Sensors detected faint responses to the station's signal, distant echoes bouncing back from deep space. Whatever the Devourers were, they were listening. The team consisted of Cruz, Adam, Maria, and 2 additional soldiers from the Freedom's Edge. They suited up in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. As they prepared to launch, Rachel approached them. Her expression was serious, almost apologetic. "I've decoded more of the logs," she said quietly. "The Varek's the ones who built this station. They didn't just seal the Devourers away. They left instructions. If you can access the core, you might be able to shut it down. And if we can't?" Adam asked, his tone bitter. Rachel hesitated before answering. "Then the Devourers will come. And based on what I've read, we won't stand a chance." With those sobering words, the team boarded the shuttle and launched toward the station once again. The journey was short but felt endless. No one spoke as they approached the looming structure, its iridescent glow casting an eerie light across the cockpit. When they docked, the airlock opened with a hiss, revealing the same dark corridor they had fled hours earlier. This time, however, the station reacted instantly. Lights flickered violently, and the walls seemed to shift and twist unnaturally. The symbols etched into the surfaces pulsed faster, almost angrily, as if the station recognized their return. The hum of machinery grew louder. Vibrating through the floor and into their bones, Cruz led the way, her weapon drawn and ready. "Stay sharp," she ordered. "We don't know what's waiting for us." As they moved deeper into the station, the environment became increasingly hostile. Gravity fluctuated wildly, pulling them in different directions. Hallways twisted and changed, leading them in circles or dead ends. Voices whispered in their minds, soft at first, then growing louder and more insistent. They weren't words, but feelings: fear, hunger, rage. It was as though the station itself was trying to drive them mad. "This thing doesn't want us here," Adam muttered, his voice strained. He kept glancing over his shoulder, expecting some unseen threat to leap out at any moment. Maria nodded, clutching her toolkit tightly. "It's like it's testing us, seeing how far we'll go before we break." They pressed on, following the map Rachel had provided. According to the Varek's logs, the core was located deep within the station, protected by layers of defenses. The closer they got, the more intense the resistance became. Automated drones appeared in greater numbers, forcing the team to fight their way through narrow corridors. Panels along the walls slid open, releasing bursts of energy that knocked them off their feet. Finally, after what felt like hours, they reached the core chamber. It was massive, larger than any other room they had encountered so far. In the center stood a towering machine, its surface covered in glowing symbols that shifted and rearranged themselves constantly. Arcs of electricity crackled around it, illuminating the chamber with harsh, strobing light. Maria stepped forward, her hands trembling as she examined the device. "This is it," she said. "The core. If I can interface with it, I might be able to shut it down." "Do it," Cruz ordered. "We'll hold them off." Adam and the other soldiers took positions around the chamber, weapons raised and ready. Drones began pouring in almost immediately, swarming toward them with terrifying speed. Lasers flashed, and the sound of gunfire filled the air. The team fought fiercely, taking down as many drones as they could, but there were too many. Waves of them kept coming, overwhelming their defenses. Maria worked quickly, her fingers flying over the console. Sweat dripped down her face as she struggled to override the system. "It's fighting me," she shouted. "I need more time." Cruz fired steadily, her movements precise and controlled. "You've got it," she replied. "Just keep going." Behind them, the voices grew louder, more aggressive. Shadows moved along the walls, twisting and writhing like living things. The team could feel the presence of something ancient and malevolent pressing down on them, watching, waiting. Finally, Maria let out a triumphant cry. "I'm in, shutting it down now." The core shuddered violently, its lights dimming as the energy coursing through it began to fade. The drones froze mid-attack, their glowing eyes flickering out one by one. For a brief moment, the chamber fell silent, but the silence didn't last long. A low rumble shook the entire station, followed by a deafening roar that echoed through the corridors. The walls cracked and buckled, and the ground beneath their feet began to split apart. "We need to move now!" Cruz yelled, grabbing Maria's arm and pulling her toward the exit. The team ran as fast as they could, dodging falling debris and collapsing floors. Behind them, the station began to implode, its systems failing catastrophically. They reached the airlock just as the core chamber collapsed entirely, sending shockwaves rippling through the structure. The shuttle launched moments later, narrowly escaping the station as it crumbled into pieces. From a safe distance, they watched as the remains of the alien megastructure drifted apart, its beacon silenced forever, or so they thought, back aboard the Atlas Prime. Rachel reviewed the data recovered from the station. Her expression darkened as she read the final translation of the Virex logs. One line stood out, chilling her to the bone. "They are not gone, only sleeping." She stared at the screen, her heart pounding. Somewhere, far beyond the stars, the Devourers stirred, and they were coming. Let me know if you'd like this saved as a separate document opening .docx or DDF. The shuttle carrying Captain Elena Cruz and her team docked with the Freedom's Edge, its battered hull bearing the scars of their desperate escape from the alien station. The crew aboard the frigate greeted them with a mix of relief and unease. The station's destruction had been visible even from orbit, its massive structure crumbling into pieces as the core collapsed, but no one celebrated. The weight of what they had done or failed to do hung over everyone like a storm cloud. Cruz stepped off the shuttle first, her face pale but determined. Lieutenant Adam Porter followed close behind, his weapon still slung across his shoulder, his eyes darting around as though expecting an attack at any moment. Maria Delgado brought up the rear, clutching her toolkit tightly against her chest. She looked exhausted, her hands trembling slightly as she set the toolkit down on a nearby table. General Marcus Bellamy arrived moments later, his expression unreadable. He wasted no time getting straight to the point. "Report," he said sharply, his voice cutting through the tension-filled air. Cruz took a deep breath before speaking. "We shut down the beacon, General. The core is destroyed. Whatever that thing was calling out to ... it's not calling anymore." Bellamy nodded slowly, his gaze shifting to Maria. "And the data? Did you recover anything useful?" Maria hesitated, glancing at Cruz for reassurance. When the captain gave a slight nod, she spoke. "I managed to pull some logs from the core before we left. They're complicated, but I think they'll help us understand what happened here." Rachel Newman, who had been standing quietly in the corner, stepped forward. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with worry. "Let me see them," she said softly, holding out her hand. Maria handed over a small data chip, and Rachel quickly inserted it into her portable workstation. The screens lit up with streams of alien symbols and fragmented translations. Rachel's fingers flew over the keyboard as she began decoding the information. The room fell silent except for the soft hum of the machines and the occasional beep of her equipment. Minutes stretched into hours as Rachel worked. The others waited anxiously, their nerves fraying with each passing second. Finally, Rachel leaned back in her chair, her face pale and her hands shaking. "It's worse than we thought," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "What is?" Bellamy asked, stepping closer. Rachel turned the screen toward him, pointing to a line of text highlighted in red. "The Virex, the ones who built this station, they didn't just seal the Devourers away. They tried to destroy them, but they couldn't, so they locked them inside the station, hoping they'd stay trapped forever." She paused, swallowing hard. "But the Devourers aren't gone. They're dormant, and now ... She trailed off, her voice breaking. "Now what?" Cruz prompted, her tone sharp but tinged with fear. Rachel met her gaze, her eyes filled with dread. "Now they know we're here." A heavy silence settled over the room. Everyone understood the implications. Humanity had not only awakened the prison, but also alerted its prisoners to their presence. Somewhere, far beyond the stars, the Devourers were stirring, and they would come. Back on Earth, news of the mission spread cautiously. Governments scrambled to prepare for the unknown threat, while military leaders debated how best to defend the planet. Publicly, officials downplayed the danger, assuring citizens that everything was under control. Privately, however, panic rippled through the highest levels of power. No one knew when or how the Devourers would arrive. Rachel became the lead researcher on the recovered data, working tirelessly to decode more of the Virex logs. Her days blurred together as she pored over the alien language, piecing together fragments of history and warning. She published a book titled Echoes of the Forgotten, detailing the events of the mission and the lessons learned. It became an instant bestseller, sparking widespread debate about humanity's place in the universe and the dangers of unchecked curiosity. Meanwhile, Maria Delgado struggled to adjust to life after the mission. She had survived, but the memories of the station haunted her dreams. Every night she saw the twisting walls, heard the whispers in her mind, and felt the crushing weight of the Devourer's presence. She began giving public talks, urging caution in the face of the unknown. Her speeches resonated with many, especially those who had lost loved ones during the fleet's initial encounter with the station, on a small moon colony orbiting Jupiter. Maria sat alone in her quarters staring at a blank screen. She wanted to write about her experiences, to put her thoughts into words, but every time she tried, the images came flooding back. The station wasn't just a machine, it was alive, sentient, and malevolent. And it had shown her things she couldn't unsee. Adam Porter returned to active duty, throwing himself into training exercises and simulations. He told himself it was preparation, but deep down, he knew it was avoidance. The mission had shaken him to his core, forcing him to confront the fragility of human existence. He spent hours in the gym, pushing his body to its limits, trying to outrun the fear that lingered in the back of his mind. Captain Cruz remained stoic, leading her crew with quiet determination. She refused to let herself dwell on what had happened, focusing instead on preparing her ship for whatever might come next. But even she couldn't ignore the unease that settled in her gut whenever she looked out at the stars. Something was out there, watching, waiting. Weeks passed, then months. Life aboard the fleet returned to a semblance of normalcy, though the shadow of the Devourers loomed large. The fleet regrouped, repairing damaged ships and reinforcing defenses. General Bellamy ordered increased patrols along the edges of explored space, hoping to detect any signs of movement before it was too late. Then one night a new signal was detected. It came from the edge of the Oort cloud, faint but unmistakably artificial. Sensors picked up a repeating pattern, pulsing every few hours like a heartbeat. At first, scientists dismissed it as residual energy from the station's destruction. But as the signal grew stronger, doubts began to creep in. Rachel received the first translation. Her hands trembled as she read the words aloud to Bellamy and the senior officers gathered in the command center. "They heard us," she whispered, her voice cracking. "They're coming." The room fell silent, the gravity of her words sinking in. The Devourers weren't just waking, they were moving. And they were heading straight for Earth. General Bellamy clenched his fists, his jaw tightening with resolve. "Prepare the fleet," he ordered. "We don't know how much time we have, but we need to be ready." Cruz stood beside him, her expression grim. "What's the plan, sir?" Bellamy turned to face her, his eyes hard and unwavering. "We fight. We hold the line until reinforcements arrive or until we can find another way to stop them." Cruz nodded, though her heart sank. She knew what he wasn't saying, that reinforcements might never come and another way might not exist. This was it. Humanity's entire force would stand between Earth and the DVOURERS. As the fleet mobilized, Rachel continued analyzing the signal. She noticed subtle patterns within the transmission, almost like coordinates. Tracing them led her to a chilling realization. The Devourers weren't just approaching, they were mapping their route, calculating the fastest path to Earth. "They're intelligent," she said during a meeting with Bellamy and his advisors. "This isn't a random attack. They're planning their approach carefully." Bellamy frowned. "Meaning?" "Meaning we need to act fast. If we wait for them to reach us, it'll be too late." Bellamy nodded, his expression darkening. "Then we take the fight to them. Preparations began immediately. Ships were loaded with weapons and supplies, crews drilled relentlessly, and strategies were formulated and reformulated. The fleet would launch a preemptive strike, intercepting the Devourers before they reached Earth. It was a risky plan, but it was the only one they had as the launch date approached. Tensions ran high. Crew members said their goodbyes to loved ones, knowing there was a good chance they wouldn't return. Families sent messages of support, children drew pictures of spaceships and heroes, and prayers were whispered into the void. On the eve of departure, crews stood alone on the bridge of the Freedom's Edge, staring out at the stars. She thought about all they had sacrificed, all they had risked, and all they still had to lose. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her, but she refused to let it break her. She had made a promise to protect her crew, to protect Earth, and to face whatever came next with courage. Behind her, Adam entered the bridge, his footsteps soft but deliberate. "Captain," he said, his voice hesitant. "Do you think we can win?" Cruz turned to face him, her expression calm but resolute. "We have to," she replied simply, "because if we gone single quotes, She trailed off, letting the unspoken truth hang in the air. Adam nodded, understanding without needing to hear the rest. Together they gazed out at the stars, knowing that somewhere beyond them, the Devourers were coming, and this time humanity would be ready. Let me know if you'd like. This saved as a separate document opening .docx or .pdf. The fleet launched into the void, its ships forming a massive armada that stretched across the stars. Engines roared as they left Earth's orbit behind, their destination unknown but their purpose clear. Humanity's entire force was on the line, and failure was not an option. Captain Elena Cruz stood on the bridge of the Freedom's Edge, her eyes fixed on the navigation screen. The coordinates Rachel Newman had calculated pointed to a region of space near the edge of the Oort cloud, a vast, icy expanse where sunlight barely reached. General Marcus Bellamy addressed the fleet over a secure channel, his voice steady but heavy with resolve. "This is it," he said. "We don't know what we're facing, but we do know one thing. If we fail, Earth is lost. Stay sharp, stay focused, and remember why we're here, for humanity." The transmission ended, leaving silence in its wake. Crew members exchanged glances, their expressions tense but determined. Lieutenant Adam Porter tightened his grip on the controls of his fighter, while Maria Delgado double-checked the weapon systems aboard the frigate. No one spoke. The enormity of what they were about to do weighed heavily on everyone. As the fleet approached the designated coordinates, sensors picked up movement. At first it was faint, just blips on the radar, almost indistinguishable from background noise. But as they drew closer, the blips grew stronger, more defined. Whatever was out there, it was big. And it was coming toward them. Rachel Newman worked feverishly at her station aboard the command ship Atlas Prime. Her fingers flew over the keyboard as she analyzed the incoming data. The signal they had detected earlier was growing louder, pulsing with increasing intensity. It wasn't random, it was deliberate, like a heartbeat syncing with their approach. "They're here," she whispered, her voice trembling. She turned to Bellamy, who stood nearby, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. "They've been tracking us since we left Earth?" Bellamy nodded grimly. "How many?" Rachel hesitated, her eyes scanning the screens. I can't tell. There are too many signals. It's like they're everywhere." Before Bellamy could respond, alarms blared across the fleet. The ships rocked violently as something massive emerged from the darkness ahead. It was unlike anything anyone had ever seen, a swarm of creatures, each larger than a city, moving in perfect synchronization. Their bodies shimmered with iridescent colors, shifting and twisting as though alive. Tentacles lashed out, energy crackling around them like lightning. Cruz's voice came over the comms, sharp and urgent. "All ships, prepare for combat. Repeat, prepare for combat." The battle began instantly. Lasers flashed, missiles streaked through space, and explosions lit up the void like fireworks. The Devourers moved with terrifying speed, their forms fluid and unpredictable. Ships fired relentlessly, but the creatures seemed impervious to damage. When struck, they split apart, dividing into smaller versions of themselves before reforming moments later. "This isn't working," Adam shouted, his voice strained as he dodged another attack. His fighter darted between tentacles, narrowly avoiding destruction. "They just keep coming." Maria worked furiously to recalibrate the weapon systems aboard the Freedom's Edge. "We need to target their cores," she yelled. "If we can hit the center of each creature, maybe we can take them down." Cruz relayed the information to the fleet. "Focus fire on the centers. Aim for the glowing points." The strategy worked, at least partially. Several smaller creatures dissolved into clouds of energy when their cores were destroyed. But for every one they eliminated, 2 more took its place. The swarm continued to grow, surrounding the fleet and cutting off escape routes, back aboard. The Atlas Primatial watched in horror as the situation deteriorated. The Devourers weren't just attacking, they were learning. Every failed attempt gave them new information, allowing them to adapt and counterattack. The fleet was outnumbered and outmatched. "We can't win this way," Rachel said, turning to Bellamy. Tears streamed down her face, but her voice remained steady. "We need to try something else." Bellamy clenched his fists, his mind racing. "What do you suggest?" Rachel hesitated, then pulled up a set of schematics on her screen. The Virex logs mentioned a failsafe, a weapon designed specifically to combat the Devourers. "It's called the Nullifier. If we can activate it, we might be able to neutralize them." "Where is it?" Bellamy demanded. "It's hidden within the ruins of the station," Rachel replied. "Or what's left of it. We'll have to go back." Bellamy's jaw tightened. He knew the risks. It meant splitting the fleet, leaving some ships behind, to hold off the Devourers while others made the dangerous journey back to the station. But it was the only chance they had. "Captain Cruz," Bellamy said over the comms, "you and your team will lead a detachment back to the station. Find the Nullifier and bring it online. The rest of us will hold the line here." Cruz didn't hesitate. "Understood, General. We'll get it done." The mission was perilous. The station's remains floated silently in space, its once massive structure reduced to jagged fragments. Cruz and her team navigated carefully, searching for any sign of the Nullifier. The area was unstable, debris drifting unpredictably, and the risk of collision was high. Maria led the search, her expertise guiding them through the wreckage. "Over here!" she called suddenly, pointing to a section of the station that had somehow survived intact. A faint glow emanated from within, pulsing rhythmically like a heartbeat. "That has to be it," Cruz said, stepping forward cautiously. The entrance was sealed, but Maria quickly went to work, bypassing the security protocols. With a final click, the door slid open, revealing a chamber filled with alien technology. In the center stood the Nullifier, a sleek, spindle-like device covered in glowing symbols. Maria approached it cautiously, her toolkit already in hand. "I can activate it," she said, her voice steady despite the tension. "But it'll take time." "How much time?" Cruz asked, her gaze scanning the horizon for any signs of danger. 10 minutes, maybe 15. Cruz nodded. "Adam, cover her. I'll keep watch outside." As Maria worked, the sound of approaching drones echoed through the ruins. The Devourers had sent scouts to investigate, and they were closing in fast. Adam opened fire, taking down several drones before retreating into the chamber. "They're coming," he shouted. Cruz joined the fight, her weapon blazing as she held the line. The drones were relentless, swarming toward them with terrifying speed. Explosions rocked the area, sending debris flying in all directions. Inside the chamber, Maria worked frantically. Sweat dripped down her face as she interfaced with the Nullifier, her hands shaking but precise. The symbols on its surface shifted and rearranged themselves, responding to her input. Finally, a low hum filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. "I've got it," Maria cried. "Activating now." The Nullifier sprang to life, its glow intensifying until it filled the entire chamber. A pulse of energy erupted outward, rippling through space like a shockwave. The drones froze mid-attack, their forms dissolving into nothingness. Beyond the ruins, the swarm of Devourers recoiled, their bodies disintegrating as the nullifier's power spread. Cruz, Adam, and Maria stumbled back, shielding their eyes from the blinding light. When it faded, the battlefield was eerily quiet. The Devourers were gone, or at least most of them were. Scattered remnants floated aimlessly, harmless and inert, back aboard the Atlas Prime. Bellamy received confirmation of the nullifier's success. Relief washed over him, but it was short-lived. The cost of victory had been high. Dozens of ships had been lost and countless lives sacrificed. The fleet limped home, battered but alive. On Earth, celebrations erupted as news of the victory spread. Humanity had faced the unknown and prevailed, but at a great price. Rachel published a follow-up to her book, detailing the final battle and honoring those who had fallen. Maria gave speeches advocating for caution in future exploration, urging humanity to learn from its mistakes. But even as the world began to heal, Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that something was still out there. Buried deep within the recovered logs, she found a single line that chilled her to the bone. They are not all gone. Some remain. She stared at the screen, her heart pounding. Somewhere, far beyond the stars, the Devourers stirred again, and this time they would be ready. Let me know if you'd like this saved as a separate document opening parenthesis .docx or .pdf.